He had no family name. In a country where family name determined everything you could be, he had none. He would die as the ruler of Japan. This is not a story about luck. It is a story about what happens when extraordinary intelligence has absolutely nothing to lose. Toyotomi Hideyoshi was born in 1537 in Owari province, the same province as Oda Nobunaga. His father, a peasant foot soldier who had served briefly in Nobunaga's father's army, died when Hideyoshi was 7. His mother remarried. His stepfather disliked him. He had no inheritance, no land, no clan, no training. Under Japanese law of the era, he could not carry a sword, could not hold samurai rank, could not own domain. The entire social and legal structure of feudal Japan was designed to ensure that what he was born was what he would remain. At approximately 16, the records are inconsistent on the exact year, he left home. Not with a plan, with a direction. He had heard of Imagawa Yoshimoto, the great warlord we met in Tokugawa's story, and walked toward his domain, looking for some way to be useful. He ended up serving as a sandal bearer for a minor retainer in the Imagawa domain. A sandal bearer, the lowest possible function in a samurai household, the person who carries footwear and is invisible to everyone around him. Most people in that position focus on the sandals. Hideyoshi focused on everything else. Who was talking to whom? Which lords were rising? Which alliances were forming? Where the power was actually moving versus where it appeared to be moving. He spent every moment of his invisibility learning the architecture of power from the inside. The exact circumstances of how Hideyoshi came to serve Oda Nobunaga are disputed. The most famous account, possibly apocryphal, definitely persistent, is that Nobunaga needed someone to repair and maintain his sandals, and Hideyoshi presented himself. Whether or not the sandal story is accurate, by approximately 1558, Hideyoshi was in Nobunaga's service. Again, at the lowest level. Again, a nobody in a household of somebodies watching everything. The records that survive describe Nobunaga noticing Hideyoshi through a sequence of small demonstrations. Not grand gestures, small ones. The task completed faster than expected. The problem solved before being asked. The information delivered that nobody else had thought to gather. Nobunaga, who trusted his own instincts more than any advisor, began giving Hideyoshi progressively more responsibility. The most documented early story involves the repair of Kyosu Castle. Nobunaga needed sections of the castle repaired quickly, before winter. The samurai administrators estimated the work would take several months. Hideyoshi asked to manage it. Was given the assignment, probably skeptically. He organized the work in shifts, day and night, divided the labor in ways the castle managers had not considered, and completed the repair in a fraction of the estimated time. This was not construction expertise. This was what Hideyoshi always did. He looked at a problem and saw the human system underneath it. Who needed to be motivated how? What incentive would make each person work at their actual capacity, where the bottleneck was that nobody else had identified? Nobunaga took notice. Within years, the peasant sandal bearer was commanding armies. Here we need to pause on something. Nobunaga, the demon king, the radical who burned traditions, was the only warlord in Japan who could have elevated Hideyoshi. Not because he was kind, because he genuinely did not care about the rules that kept birth equal to destiny. He cared about results. Hideyoshi produced results. That was enough. Without Nobunaga's willingness to look past the thing everyone else in Japan would have seen as disqualifying, Hideyoshi never rises. This is the second time in this series that Nobunaga created the condition that everything else depended on. Through the 1560s and 1570s, Hideyoshi rose through Nobunaga's ranks. Not through political maneuvering, through military performance. Assignment after assignment, each more complex, each more important, handled with the same quality that had characterized his work from the beginning. Hideyoshi was not the most skilled swordsman. He was not the most physically imposing commander. What he was the most effective organizer of people that feudal Japan had ever seen. His specific gift, understanding what each person, lord, soldier, farmer, rival, needed in order to cooperate, and then providing exactly that. His reputation was built not through the battles he won, but through the sieges he ended, often without fighting. The most famous, the Siege of Miki Castle, 1578 to 1580. Rather than assault the castle, which was heavily fortified, Hideyoshi cut off its supply lines completely. Every road, every path, every potential resupply route. He built a network of fortified positions around the castle over 2 years and simply waited. The castle's garrison starved. The commander committed suicide. The castle surrendered. Most commanders measured victory by the enemies killed. Hideyoshi measured it by the enemies neutralized at minimum cost to himself. He understood something Nobunaga never fully accepted. A lord who surrenders and is treated generously becomes a potential ally. A lord who is destroyed becomes a blood feud. By 1582, Hideyoshi was conducting the Chugoku campaign, pacifying Western Japan for Nobunaga. He was the most trusted general in Nobunaga's army. The peasant sandal-bearer was commanding tens of thousands of men and winning. On June 20th, 1582, Hideyoshi was deep in Western Japan, conducting the siege of Takamatsu Castle. A messenger arrived. Nobunaga was dead, betrayed by Akechi Mitsuhide, Honnoji. Hideyoshi received this information and made the fastest consequential decision in this entire series. He negotiated an immediate peace with the castle he was besieging, an enemy he had been fighting for months, in a single day. Then he turned his army around and marched back east, 300 kilometers, in 11 days. Armies of the era typically moved at 30 kilometers per day under favorable conditions. Hideyoshi moved his army at nearly that pace through mountain roads in summer heat, while simultaneously managing the political communications that would define what came after. He arrived before any other of Nobunaga's generals had fully understood what was happening. Defeated Akechi Mitsuhide at the Battle of Yamazaki, 11 days after Honnoji. It was at this moment, this 11-day movement, that everyone who mattered in Japan understood that Nobunaga's successor had already been decided. Not by appointment, by action. Over the next 8 years, Hideyoshi completed what Nobunaga had started, the unification of Japan. Nobunaga unified through destruction. Hideyoshi unified through incorporation. Where Nobunaga burned what resisted, Hideyoshi made resistance less attractive than cooperation. Lords who surrendered received their domains back, sometimes reduced, always conditional, but intact. Their families were welcomed. Their dignity was preserved. Their future was viable. The calculation he offered every warlord, you can fight me, and I will eventually win, because I always do, and then you will have nothing. Or you can join me, and keep most of what you have. Most chose to join. One of Hideyoshi's most significant and underappreciated policies. In 1588, he issued the Katanagari, the sword hunt, a decree requiring all non-samurai, farmers, merchants, monks, to surrender their weapons. This was presented as practical. Weapons would be melted down to build a great Buddha statue. It was actually structural. By legally separating the class that carried swords from the class that did not, Hideyoshi was crystallizing the social structure of Japan in a way that would make future uprisings structurally impossible. A peasant rebellion requires peasants with weapons. After the sword hunt, Japan's peasants were unarmed. The man born a peasant, who had transcended every limit that peasant birth imposed, was now the architect of a system that would ensure no other peasant could do what he had done. This is not hypocrisy. This is the logic of power. The man who climbed the ladder pulls it up behind him. Not from cruelty, but because the ladder, left in place, is a threat to everything he has built.
In 1591, Hideyoshi retired from the formal position of Kampaku, imperial regent, and took the title Taiko, retired regent, giving the formal position to his nephew. He remained the most powerful man in Japan, just without the official title, a distinction that mattered enormously in a culture where form and substance were not always the same thing. Here is where the Hideyoshi story becomes something different. In 1592, Hideyoshi launched an invasion of Korea with approximately 160,000 soldiers, the stated goal to conquer Korea, then China, then, in some accounts, India. Historians have debated for 400 years why he did this. The most common explanations: he needed somewhere to direct the military energy of a unified Japan, hundreds of thousands of trained soldiers with no war to fight. He wanted to expand his own legend beyond Japan. He was beginning to show signs of the instability that would define his final years. All three are probably partly true. The initial Korean campaign moved with shocking speed. Japanese forces, armed with arquebuses that Korean armies had not faced before, captured Seoul in less than 3 weeks. Then the campaign stalled. The Korean Navy, under Admiral Yi Sun-sin, destroyed Japanese supply lines. Chinese Ming Dynasty forces entered the conflict on Korea's side. The campaign dragged, then failed, then was negotiated to an armistice that satisfied nobody. In 1597, Hideyoshi launched a second invasion. It was going no better than the first when he died in 1598. The Korea campaigns cost Japan approximately 100,000 casualties. They devastated Korea. They exhausted the military and financial resources that Hideyoshi had spent a career building. And they generated resentments among the lords who had been forced to fund and fight them that would directly fuel the divisions that led to Sekigahara. Tokugawa, who had managed to avoid most of the Korea campaigns, emerged from them with his strength largely intact. The lords who had borne the full cost of two failed invasions were weakened, resentful, and looking for a different arrangement. Hideyoshi's final strategic blunder had built Tokugawa's Sekigahara coalition for him. Beneath the military campaigns, beneath the political decisions, beneath the cost and the failing judgment, there was something simpler, something that the most powerful man in Japan could not manufacture, could not strategize toward, could not achieve through intelligence or adaptability or the extraordinary human understanding that had carried him from sandal bearer to ruler. For most of his adult life, Hideyoshi had no son. His first wife, Nene, bore him no children. He took concubines, had relationships with numerous women. No sons survived infancy. In 1591, his nephew and designated heir died suddenly. His nephew's young son became the next designated heir, a child, again. Then, in 1593, Hideyoshi's concubine Yodo gave birth to a son, Hideyori. He was 56 years old. He had spent his entire adult life building something with no certainty that anyone would inherit it. And now there was a son. The records of Hideyoshi's final years describe a man changed by the arrival of this child. Decisions became more erratic. Lords who had been trusted were suddenly suspected. His nephew, who had been designated heir, was ordered to commit suicide along with his entire family. The man who had built his career on understanding people, on seeing exactly what each person needed and providing it, became, in his final years, someone who saw threats in people who had given him 40 years of loyalty. On his deathbed in 1598, Hideyoshi made Tokugawa and 4 other regents swear to protect Hideyori until the boy came of age. He wept as he asked. Tokugawa swore. We know what happened next. The man who swore the oath won Sekigahara 2 years later. Hideyori, who by then was a teenager sheltering in Osaka Castle, would spend the next 16 years as a symbol around which Tokugawa's enemies gathered, until 1615, when Tokugawa destroyed Osaka Castle. Hideyori died in the fire. He was 23 years old. The son Hideyoshi had built everything for. The son who had changed him, damaged him, driven the decisions that weakened everything he had created, outlived him by 17 years, and died without inheriting anything. The thing Hideyoshi wanted most, the one thing he could not strategize into existence, was a son who would carry what he had built. He got the son. He didn't get the rest. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, born 1537, died 1598, peasant, sandal-bearer, general, regent, ruler of Japan. The longest distance between start and finish of anyone in this series, traveled not through luck, but through a specific quality that we have not fully named in any previous video. Adaptability. Not flexibility in the passive sense, not going wherever the wind goes. Active, intelligent, constant recalibration. The ability to read each new situation without the assumptions of the previous one, to see each person, each problem, each moment as specifically itself, and respond to what is actually there rather than what you expected to find. That quality is what carried a sandal-bearer to the summit of Japan. And the loss of it, in the final years, when certainty replaced curiosity, when fear replaced understanding, is what unraveled everything he built. The lesson is not stay adaptable when things are going well. The lesson is harder. Stay adaptable when you have the most to lose, when the thing you have built is finally real, and the fear of losing it starts to look more like wisdom than it actually is. That is when adaptability matters most, and that is when it is hardest to keep. One question: is there something you have built, a relationship, a career, an identity, where the fear of losing it is now shaping your decisions more than the original reason you built it? That is the Hideyoshi question. Drop it in the comments or just sit with it. Subscribe. Bell on. I'll see you next week.